JavaScript is single-threaded and it normally runs code synchronously, meaning it executes code line by line. But what happens when a task like fetching data from an API takes time? Let's look at the default behavior of JavaScript. So I'm going to open my code editor. I will be using Visual Studio Code, and I'll also be using the Node.js runtime. So if you don't have Node.js installed, just head over to nodejs.org and download the LTS version for your operating system. Now back to the my code editor. Let's look at the default behavior of JavaScript while with fetching data. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to console log, and here I'm going to say start, and then here I'm going to say const data equals to fetch for fetch data, and then here I'm going to pass in an API. So let me go to the browser real quick, open a new tab, and I'm going to use a JSON placeholder API. So I'll say copy that, and then I'm going to go back to the code editor. Let's pass in the source. There we go, and I just want to get the post with an ID of 1. So, okay, so that's the API endpoint. I'm going to pass it there, and then in here I want to console log the data which is going to be fetched, and then at the very bottom I can console log finish, like that. Now let me add some spacing for better visual, like that. All right, now I'm going to open my terminal, and I will be using the node runtime. Run this, so node index.js. And you can see how JavaScript works. We have start, which was the first console log here, and then we had a promise, even though, so this promise is coming from the data here, which we console log. So this is the default behavior of JavaScript. JavaScript tells us that hey, this is a promise. Now a promise is an object which represents a future value, right? So now because this is going to take time, because JavaScript has to go to this endpoint, get the post, and return back to us. So that is like a process. It's going to take a little bit, but JavaScript does not pause the code execution, so it goes ahead and executes all the other code. So that's why we see that the data here is a promise and it is pending because it's waiting for that response. And if you can actually see clearly here, if I run this again, you can see that it takes time until the execution stops. It takes some seconds there, and then finally we have finished. So what if we wanted to have a real data here? Okay, what if we want to process this data instead of pending? So that's where promises comes in. Now, as I said earlier, a promise is it's an object which represents a future value. So what we have to do here is consume this promise. Now to consume this promise, we're going to use something called .then to consume this promise properly. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say data, and then I'm going to say .then, and now here we can have the result of that fetch, and this is going to be a callback function like that. And now inside here I'm going to console log the result. Okay, and that should be result like that. All right, now let me run this one more time, and now you can now see if I expand that. Okay, so now you can see that the start ran first as usual, and then the finish ran second. So as I told you that JavaScript is not going to stop executing the code, but using then it's going to handle this response in a much better way. So what happens here is that JavaScript is going to wait for this to complete, but as it waits, it's going to keep on executing all the other lines of code which follows, right, until this is completed. Now once this is completed, it's now going to console log that result, right? And that's why you can see here we have this giant object called response here, and this is the response from the API. Okay, but as you can see here, this API doesn't have the data we wanted. This is just a whole lot of headers and all that. Okay, so now we want to access the real data which we fetched. Okay, for instance, here we was fetching the posts. All right, so what we want to see the post, we don't want to see the headers. So to do that, what we're going to do, instead of console logging the result, because now this result is not data that we can work with. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to return the result but as a JSON. Okay, the result as JSON. And then after that, I'm going to chain another then. Now here I will get data which I can actually work with, human readable data, which I can now work with. And now then here I can console log the result like that. Okay, I'm going to save that. Now let's run this one more time, clear my terminal. Now if I run that, you can now clearly see that now I have some real data. I have a user ID 1, I have an ID of 1, and the title of the blog, which is that one there, and the body, which is the blog content. It's all that. So this is now data which I can work with. Now the problem with using promises is that notice how we can chain this dot then dot then dot then. Now let's say I wanted to do something with this data, like for example show it on the HTML. Now what I will do is that I will also return this like this. I would also return the result like that, and then inside here I will now chain another then dot then. Now I can now get the result from here, result. Now here I can now pass that result to the browser using the DOM manipulations. Okay, so you can see how we are chaining this then, which is going to make our code is going to make our code messy, and it's going to be hard for us to follow this code, for someone to read this code because of these nested then. Okay, so now that brings us to async and await, which is a much better approach for handling promises in JavaScript. So async await is a modern way for handling promises in JavaScript. Now to use async await, we create a function. If you are not familiar with JavaScript function, I made a video about functions, and I will leave the link to the video in the description so you can go ahead and watch that. So I'll create a function called fetch, and then data equals to, not equals to. So this is a function here. Now to create an async function, now async is to use async and await, you have to create an async function. Okay, so this is a function. So now we add the word async at the before the function keyword. So this will tell JavaScript this is an async function. The function name is fetch data, and all the way down here I can call the fetch data function. Again, if you're not familiar with JavaScript functions, just check the description of the video and you get a link to where I talked about JavaScript functions, and you'll have a better understanding of what's happening here. All right, so inside here, what I want to do now, I want to say const data equals to, and then fetch, then I will pass in the same endpoint we used before. There we go. Now inside here we have to tell JavaScript to wait for this to be completed. So what we do, we come here before the fetch and we tell JavaScript to await for this particular operation to be completed. Okay, so JavaScript is going to pause the code execution. Unlike using promises, we saw that JavaScript is going to keep on executing code until the promise was resolved. But now here JavaScript is going to pause the code execution until this is completed. So let me show you. I'm going to console log here. I'm going to say start, and then I'm going to copy that same line, and after the fetch here I'm going to say stop, like that. All right, now pay attention to what is going to happen after after I run this code. So I can say node index. Now you see that we have start and then stop. Okay, let me show you that again. We have start and then it paused a little bit and then we had stop. So now it paused because it's going to fetch this data. It was waiting for this to be completed. So we can see this clearly by actually handling this data properly. So what we can do is that we can say const. I'm going to rename this to request, and this one I'm going now to rename name this data equals to, request.json, like that. It's going to be .json, like that. So what happens here is that we are handling the response in using JSON so that we can get the readable data which we can actually work with, right? Just the way we did with the promises. And now in that inside here, I can console log my data. Now I want you to see now what happens. Yeah, now I'm going to clear that, and if I run that, you see we have start, and then we had a promise. Okay, so the reason why we're having a promise here instead of the real data is because we also have to tell JavaScript wait for this. So we have to say await. Okay, yeah, like that. So we have to tell JavaScript to await until the response has been handled as JSON. The response has been passed as JSON, and then now proceed executing the code. Now I'm going to clear that again, and I'm running this again. Now you can see that clearly that we had start, and then we waited until this was completed, and then we console logged it, and then we had stop. Now with async, this is a much better approach, because let's say we wanted to use this data here. Okay, so unlike the promises where the code execution would still go on and on and on until this is completed. Until this is completed is when it's going to be handled. Okay, hopefully you can get me clearly. Now this is how async works. We tell JavaScript to wait until this is completed, then continue executing the rest of the code. However, if we had another function here, JavaScript is going to keep on executing that function until this function is basically completed. But what is inside the async function is going to be executed line by line, line by line, line by line. Okay, hopefully you can get this clearly. If you found this video helpful and you want more programming content, consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel for future videos. Thank you for watching, and subscribe for more coding videos.